go.
Streaming from South Africa to the world. This is the Stonks Go Moon podcast. What just happened? We break it down so you don't have to.
Welcome everyone to the Stonks Go Moon podcast. My guest today, Andrew Pancholi, returning guest, friend of the show, best-selling author and writer of the Market Timing Report. Andrew, welcome to this pod.
Rocco, thanks for having me back. I'm really excited to be here.
Honestly, I don't know how we're going to top the last podcast. Some people call it the best financial podcast that they've ever listened to. I have actual evidence to prove that. Let's see how we go on. You wrote a post the other day saying we are seeing some very strong September cycles. And my comment to you was, oh, so that's why I have this uncomfortable feeling deep in my stomach. Andrew, we need you to unpack what is actually going on for us in terms of, I guess, the confluence of cycles that are coming together at the moment.
Sure. So, Rocco, what we see, there's two angles here. There's geopolitics and markets, and of course, they're intrinsically linked and related. So one of the things about September is if we look statistically at the US markets, then September sees the most changes in trend, so highs and lows or whatever, but it also sees the most crises, not just in markets. So we can go back to September the 15th, 2008, which is when Lehman Brothers collapsed. And of course, the market was already in a down move then, but then it kind of went into capitulation. And that was the global financial crisis. We can, there's several other examples we can go back to. And the one I want to talk about in a minute is 30 years ago this month is where we saw the ERM collapse. George Soros made $1 billion in a day. We have seen the long-term capital management crisis was in September 98, off the top of my head. We saw the outbreak of the Second World War. You look at the big crises, then geopolitically, there's a bunch of stuff that comes in. So September is very much on the radar. And as you know, we follow these patterns. So
yes,
from what I recall, let's pick this up from last time we were hanging out together. And we talked about the 60-year cycle, right?
Yes, we did.
And we talked about how, so the market has followed the 60-year cycle. And I'd like to come back to that one, the US equity market and the Western equity markets. But most importantly, the geopolitical pattern has absolutely matched that. So we spoke, must have been January, I think. And one of the key factors that I was discussing and telling my clients at the Market Timing Report was be prepared for some physical conflict and also an escalation in Cold War tension. Now, the reason being, if we go back 60 years to 1962, we saw that year the Cold War really escalated and it culminated. It was a degree of culmination in October 62. So watch this space. We are into part two with the Cuban Missile Crisis. But what was the Cuban Missile Crisis all about? Khrushchev, the Russians putting missiles within striking distance of America. So what happened on February the 24th? You know, everybody said it wasn't going to happen, but Putin started his special operations into Ukraine. Now, there's two sides to every story. And if you look at it, you can see where the Russians are coming from, the way that NATO expanded in the 30-year cycle. Because remember, the Soviet Union broke up 30 years ago. So we're talking 30s, 60s, and 90s. These are really interesting patterns here. And we'll look at all of these. So what we're saying is that we've seen the war. It's been going 6 months now. It's at a little bit of a turning point. There's an argument that Ukraine are pushing back, and the Western press are reporting that. But what is undeniable is that Putin has made significant progress into Ukraine. Of course, everybody is in this in some way or another, backing one side or another. So we've got this mass polarization. So that's the first part. Now
that's like a war cycle, right?
Yes. So these were the war cycles that came in. I think didn't we discuss the war cycles, the 82 to 84 year war cycles?
But I'm just saying that we recorded before the Russian invasion, right? And I think a caveat was upon releasing the podcast was, I need to say, listen, this was recorded before. And then when we released it, it happened as everyone was saying, hey, this isn't going to happen, you know? So I feel there was a big vindication for the work that you and your team is doing as well, and us releasing that podcast. So my point is being that these things that we are speaking about and that we have spoken about, they have actually happened.
Absolutely, Rocco. And that's our job here. It's about keeping people ahead of the game. And, Winston Churchill said, the farther back you look, the further forward you will see. Look back at history because it repeats. And that's exactly it. And in fact, in the February edition of the Market Timing Report, which I think we published on the 29th of January, we gave the exact date. That was the key date based on mathematical cycles. So this is to keep traders, investors, anybody that's got any interest in the world ahead of the game.
Yes.
So yes, and the war cycle, let's just, in case people missed that, the war cycle, basically that pattern goes back to 1939, the outbreak of the Second World War, this 82 to 84 year pattern. If you go back subsequent patterns, you will see the Crimean War coming in, which at the time was the biggest global conflict, because all the biggest nations were involved with that: Britain, France, the Ottoman Empire, Russia. This is all quite important. They all came together, and then you go back the same cycle, and that was the American War of Independence. So these are big events with the ruling superpowers of the time. So we knew we were in a window from late 2021 into 2023, 24. So this is going to continue. So that's that sphere of influence there. Now, what I think we are going to see is there's likely to be a secondary crisis based on the 1962 overlay, because the Cuban Missile Crisis really peaked mid October 1962. And whilst things don't necessarily overlay to the exact month or week, you get the flavor. So point number one is be on alert, look for an escalation. Of course, energy is one of the issues that's being talked about here. Yeah, go ahead, Rocco.
No, I was I'm counting your points. I was like, okay,
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you
no, I'm not putting my hand up in class. Don't worry.
So I think now I haven't looked enough into this at the minute, because there's a key story we're going to cover in a minute. But we talked briefly about Taiwan and Russia. We do want to watch Taiwan and China.
And China, because Taiwan fired at a Chinese drone for the first time in a very, very long time. So there's an escalation there.
Yes, and the whole Pelosi visit, which again, we covered, we didn't know it was going to be Pelosi, but we did see a very strong trigger point in the July market timing report for the very end of the month and the beginning of August. And that was the day we didn't know it was going to be hurt. That was the point that Xi went there, which was just, I tell you, unnecessary provocation, and of course then gives justification to escalate the operations for China.
Talking about unnecessary, I mean, the South African government sent a delegation of sorts to Russia to go and attend a military event there, which it didn't need to do at all. South Africa is supposed to be neutral. We like to think we're neutral. You get the sense that people are choosing sides here.
Yeah, I think it really is a case where there isn't sort of the traditional Swiss mentality is a little bit difficult, because everybody has vested interests. And why? Because we went for so many years, we went from polarization to globalization. Okay. That peaked realistically in what I wrote about in in 0 Hour, which we talk about the modern day revolution. So that one was the same cycle, 82 to 84 years. Trump and Brexit, i.e. all polarizing, Brexit polarizing. Go back, a revolution, rise of Hitler, polarizing, because Germany had got so many reparations placed on them after the First World War, the Great War. People were not happy. It was too much. The German economy was dead. You go back another one, 1848, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels released the Communist Manifesto. Workers rise up, break free of your chains, i.e. everybody had been taken off the fields, the agrarian economy, into factories, sweatshops, and the rich got super rich. So your Jeff Bezos of the day and Elon Musk's got super rich off the backs of everybody else. So that was the Communist Manifesto. Take the revolution back another one, and we got the Stamp Act, which is what triggered the American Revolution. So you got these exactly the same time cycle apart. take that whole thing, those 500 years, pretty much, put it in 2017, which is when we publish this stuff. Go back another 250 years. 250 plus 250, 500 years, 1517. Martin Luther nails his 95 Theses to the church doors in Wittenberg, starting the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation. So all these cycles came together for the back end of the last decade. We've got, revolutionary cycles, we've got cultural cycles, we've got polarization cycles, and then we've got the war cycles coming in now. So we're in a period of change. And that's really what's quite exciting about now. I mean, it is disconcerting, but there's a degree of excitement here as well.
Talk to me about America, because America is still the world's superpower. I know that your work is heavily focused on America, especially with the geopolitical tensions that we are seeing. What are you guys seeing in your research?
So what we're saying here was, if you'd asked me earlier this year, I was putting 2027 down as a really critical time period for potential civil war in North America, in the United States, based on revolutionary cycles, again, war cycles coming in, going back one cycle takes us to when America entered the Second World War, and also going back further, you go to the Civil War in America, and then the War of Independence. So
I feel there's a but. I feel there's a but coming.
Well, the thing is, I looked at this, and I'm going to bring that forward now, and I'm seeing the very strong cycles for earlier in 2024, which means we're going to get a degree of polarization. And I think this is really down to people having very strong opinions. This state that this nation that used to consider itself the policeman of the world, there are parts of it where it can't even police its own states. So we can see, I've been in and out of New York quite a bit at the minute with various things. It's not the same place it used to be. Miami's thriving. I was in Miami a few months ago.
Florida is absolutely booming. Yes.
So what's going to happen? Well, as it polarizes more, you can see California is probably going to secede. So what we're talking about? Florida has everything in its pocket. Why does it want to be bailing everywhere else out? And of course, Texas is historically, the Lone Star State.
Yes.
So you can see these countries, these states, having a strong vision for wanting their own independence. Now, you see, California arguably is not so great, but what it does have is Silicon Valley. It has a lot of resources there. Texas still has the oil structure and all the rest of it, and Florida is absolutely booming economically with all the big restaurants from New York going down to Florida and so on. So I think that's on the cards. More work to do there, but I think the breakup of America, or polarization of America, is coming sooner rather than later. And of course, 2024 is going to coincide with the next election. So whether you love him or hate him, Trump is about, and he's a very powerful personality. I know he had some good policies for the businesses of America. Equally, a lot of people fail to understand him, and when he says things, he says things. And my view is that actually he's a great marketer and publicist, self-publicist. And if he says something, if he says that, black is red,
yes,
it will be. That's it, because his people believe him so much. I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong. I'm not taking sides here.
I know. No, I know exactly where you're coming from. It's a polarizing figure. A large parts of America are running out of water. That's something that's not really being spoken about. I mean, water is a natural resource. It's one of the key factors for life. If you look at other planets, if there's no water, there can be no life. And then we have the superpower with large parts of its continent running out of water. Does this play a part somehow in everything?
Absolutely. So we said at the beginning of this session, Rocco, that we were going to look at 30, 60, and 90. So we've talked about 60, and I do want to qualify how the market pattern is overlaying the 60-year pattern. We'll come back to that. We'll do it. We'll focus in on the markets at the end, right?
Yes.
Let's go back 90, right? So what happened 90 years ago? Well, we started off the decade in 1930 with, we had the 29 crash on the 3rd of September, the top, a crash, collapse. We went into depression, recession, then depression. So many businesses went out. The biggest skyscrapers were just being completed at that point in time. What followed that? I tell you what followed that was the Dust Bowl and the famine. Okay, things got very dry, and that's what's coming up. That's the 90-year cycle playing out. All right. So yes, there is an overlay here for drought. There is an overlay here for a loss of crops, and you combine that together with the need to break up and polarize, or not the need but the wish to do that.
The wish, yes.
Yeah, it's a wish. It's an intent, isn't it?
That's absolutely fascinating how history just seems to repeat itself.
And then, in terms of the markets, because obviously most of our clients are market people, we did write we wrote in March 2020, we put a report out saying, hey, watch the grain markets. They're going to take off. Why were they going to take off? Because if you go back the 50-year pattern, so half a 100-year cycle, so why 100 years? 1907 rich man's panic, 1807 Embargo Act panic, market down 90%, 2007 global financial crisis. It's just a quick one there I can't give my life's work in 15 minutes. Go back 50 years, 1970, Russian famine.
Yes.
Dollar, end of Bretton Woods. Okay. Currency's pegged to the dollar. All right. And huge demand, and wheat goes up fourfold. All grains go up. So that's exactly what we were expecting. We get this 49, 50-year pattern overlay, and that's not over yet, because we're also now overlaying it to the 90-year cycle of the famine coming in and so on. So we're going to see further moves up in the grains. And over the next few years, it's not going to be instantaneous. Yes. And so that's that there in response to your question on drought.
Yeah, we've covered so much ground already in this short space of time. This podcast is always for people to, surface level information, so you can go and dig a bit deeper into these things. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. Before I let you leave, I want to ask you specifically about, traders and investors. They might know, might know technicals, you might know fundamentals, but very few people actually, I think, use or know about cycles. How can you incorporate cycles into your investment or trading strategy to improve your returns in the market?
Okay, well, that's a great question, Rocco. So what we do is we use the super macro cycles to get the big themes. So that's why our clients were positioned in the ags way back 2 years ago, right? We fine-tune these all the way down to the individual day using microcycles. Okay. And the best way of looking at this is we talked about the 90-year cycle. We've talked about the 60-year cycle. Let me make a point on the 60-year cycle. When we got the low in June, everybody was totally bearish. They were expecting the bottom to fall out of the market. Yes. We were looking for a very clear low there. And what I do is I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and also on Twitter. It helps me gauge sentiment. So it'd be great also if people could follow us on that. Yes. But what happened there was we got a low. And why did we get a low? Because 1962 pattern saw a low at the end of June. And the 1932 pattern, the 90-year cycle, saw a low, the end of the whole depression decline on the first week on the 7th of July. So that's one way of using macro cycles, and we honed down and we got the individual days there. And what the other way is to be let's go on the record again, right? So 15th, 16th of September 1992. So we talk 90, we talk 60, we're talking 30 now.
Yes.
A guy called George Soros made $1 billion in a day. He shorted the pound, and this is the big story. Now, in our latest market timing report, we have a bunch of turning points coming up over the next few weeks, down to the day, and that suggests we're going to see some sort of financial crisis. You've only got to look at the pound right now, but also what happened. That was a big player in the interest rate market. So there's some big twists coming up in interest rates. I'll leave it at that.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Don't give it. All I'm saying, don't give it away, especially not for free. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. If the listeners want to go and find out more about what it is that you do and they're intrigued, where can they do that?
Go to markettimingreport.com. Also, it'd be great if you follow my work on LinkedIn, Andrew Pancholi, and also on Twitter. That would be great. But if you go to the Market Timing Report, you can sign up for some updates there, and you'll see what we have coming up as well.
Absolutely fascinating and invaluable. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. To our listeners, peace, love, and prosperity. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.